Hello, everyone, and welcome back for some more Let's Read Witch on the Holy Night. We did the titular chapter, the first, last time, and now we're moving on to the second. I know I'm in for something good when I read the comments and everyone's like, that was pretty good, but here comes the Kino. So I hope you guys aren't setting me up for disappointment, but then again, the last time you did was the Carnival chapter. You didn't. That was really good. So, let's move on and find out what's up with this field of flowers that I've seen a number of times, both in imagery for this game, as well as we saw it the one time in the game as well. The golden wolf's ears stood pointed, twitching in response to the sounds around it. Apparently also, by the way, there was a early Melty leak for Type Lumina where Beowulf was apparently playable. This one, wild. I'm kind of okay with the fact that that wasn't a thing. I don't know. Unless they really played up with the whole shifting into other animals things, he's just kind of a dog at that point. Like, boneless Amaterasu, you know? Its meal finished, it curled up into a ball in anticipation of nap time and yawned, half from boredom. The old abandoned classroom had fulfilled its purpose many moons ago. For a month, the wolf had spent his time resting on top of a heap of disheveled desks. His name was Lugh Beowulf. Lugh? Like, how do you pronounce Lugh? Would it be... Okay. Name. How do you pronounce that? Oh! In Irish mythology, it was the Celtic sun god. Interesting. That the Irish god of harvest. So it's Irish, meaning it's probably pronounced like Siobhan or something. Okay. Pronunciation. Please tell me. Give it to me straight. How do I say it? Lugh? Lugh. Okay, so you do pronounce the G in this. Interesting. Lugh. Lugh Beowulf. He was a purebred werewolf, named after the sun at his birthplace, and a hero of legend upon leaving there. Hey. And now we know. So he's an little Irish lad. Hoity-toity. It goes without saying he was not from this country. He came from the land deep within the European wilderness, surrounded by mountains and forests. His homeland was a realm no human had ever set foot in. Oh. Interesting. In their isolated world forgotten by time, a diminishing race of werewolves lived in peace. Now, when we're talking about a realm no human had set foot in, when we use the word realm, are we talking in a literal sense, or like is it a proper other world? Is it hidden away, right? Because there's different ways to do a different realm. This was where Beowulf first appeared. In a cave on the outskirts of their village, the werewolves found a child bearing the same golden coat as their ancestors. The child was sleeping soundly, as if in his natural habitat. The village welcomed their new member with open arms. 2,000 years of advancing civilization had been cruel to them. As the forests were destroyed, valleys unearthed, and waters polluted, the werewolf birth rate dwindled. They were now facing one birth per decade. Oh! The child's golden coat, deviating from the typical gray or white, and shared only by their ancestors who were treated as gods, felt like a sign their prayers had been answered. A bloodline in atrophy, the werewolves were forced to embrace change. They picked up guns. This radiant child at least temporarily made them forget about their troubles. A child of light, you might say. Isn't that also another game about Irish mythology? Alas, as time passed, their hopes turned to disappointment. The Golden Wolf was not their salvation. For some reason, Lugh, that ray of golden sun, remained a child. Decades passed, and he still did not grow. Forever young, immortal, cursed. He searched the village for his birth mother, but to no avail. He searched the village for someone who understood his plight, but to no avail. Over hundreds of years, he came to realize something. He was different. Very different. Neither male nor female. Oh, neither strong nor weak. Ignorant of life and death, joy and fear. That thing's a spirit born of nature. Might look like us werewolves, but don't let that fool you. Oh. But the child himself needed not conjecture to know his own true nature. He was perfect, and therefore, he was alone. For the golden wolf, the world was too small. That was why. Indeed, that was the very reason. He wanted to know what life was. He wanted to know loss. If he was all-powerful, he wanted to know the mystery behind his all-powerfulness. Because as it was, his existence was meaningless. The golden wolf was at a loss, as were the werewolves around him. They revered him, but at the same time, wanted nothing to do with him. Luke moved back to the cave he was discovered in and resigned himself to a life of seclusion.
太陽のルー？ルーガルじゃなくて？
Loup Garou? That's French. That's, Garo. What is, wait, because I know that Loup means wolf, because it's actually the basis of my mother's maiden name. Her maiden name has Loup as the base, so, we have a lot of wolf symbolism. What does Garo mean? That's One Punch Man. No, that's not that's, meaning. Garo means werewolf. Okay. The word can also, interesting. So Garo is French meaning werewolf, Old French, which comes from the Frankish werwolf, or man-wolf, but also Garo means hungry wolf in Japanese. So it's kind of a double play on words. Very interesting. And then Loup just means wolf. Okay.
そりゃ面白い。偶然にしちゃできすぎだ。
Hey, shoutouts to the fact that they translated this wordplay thing across languages, and it works. And then one day, a quirky mage visited the village. We're gonna call her Quirky. Is she gonna have long hair for this? Or are we just gonna not see her head until?
またガタガタとうるさい。トウコさんはあれだよね。派手好きなくせに豆だよね。
Who is the voice of this child? I want to know which Unholy Knight voices, because it sounds like Kid Gil, but it might not be. Atsumi Tanizaka, or Tanizaki. It's the dub voice of Dai from all of the Dragon Quest stuff. That's Anya? That's Spy X Family Anya? Dang. Okay. Peanuts. Let's see. Who else? Any other Fate or Nasuverse media? I'm not seeing any. Yeah. They normally don't reuse stuff. Yeah, no, that's the official voice of, the biggest one there is definitely Anya. Interesting. I do not hear that in the voice at all. From his place on top of the rubble, Bayo peered into the hallway. He thought his fussy master was busy dealing with Misaki City's ley lines, but she was engrossed in making traps. 1 month passed since they made the dilapidated building their makeshift workshop. Creating a new trap for intruders became a daily pursuit of Toko's.
安全を用意しておくなんて他の生き物は大変だ。
Yeah, wow, I can't hear Anya at all. Having been like this since birth, knowing neither infancy nor dotage, he thought differently than others. For he was perfect from the day he was born, never declining, never improving. As such, he had no comprehension of weakness. Childlike, fickle, and without morals, he had no concept of good and evil as either a human or a wolf. A beautiful creature disconnected from the world around him, he was on top of all other creatures. With one exception, his master, Toko Aozaki. She showed him a sparkling, delicious world, and above all, he found her scent refreshing. To him, the world was divided into what was cool and what was not. Your preference in leisure pursuits were of no consequence to him, and he never took gender into account. The only thing that mattered to him was whether a person's life was logical and therefore cool. Oh. Let me tell you, I got a guy you'd get along with very well. His name is Gilles de Rais. I just realized that he's also a child rapist. That's probably a terrible idea. Never mind, I take that back. Toko Ozaki had her faults, but she smelled good. Get me a woman who smells good. Hello,
昼
camera!
食は済ませたか？
Damn it. So close. Bao's master entered the classroom, presumably done with her traps for the day.
夜が本番だ。それまであまり羽目を外すなよ。
Sometimes, like now, she would nag him, but on the whole, his master pleased him. In reality, the contract binding her to him was not particularly powerful. If he wanted to, he could tear her to pieces at any time. No human could restrain him. However, he had no intention of killing Toko in exchange for his freedom. And there was a reason for this. In order to move about freely in human society, he needed someone like her. As long as she did not offend him, he had no reason to rock the boat. However,
やっと本番か。待たせすぎだよ、トウコさん。
the promise she made with him in this cave and the reality of their situation had begun to come apart at the seams.
来い。最高の神秘と戦わせてやる。
He was compliant up to now, but his patience was wearing thin. The fight with the newest magician last night was an enormous letdown.
そう言うな。私も昨日は拍子抜けだったんだから。
いいけどね。実はあの子、使わないんじゃなくて、使えないだけじゃないの？
His master's expression turned serious. Not in agreement at the wolf's question, though, for she had already asked herself the same and other many similar questions.
いや、使うぐらいなら死んだ方がマシなのかもな。
そんなバカなことがあるの？使わないと死んじゃう状態だったんだよ。
だから、そんなバカな考えが成立するぐらい。
That it must be too terrifying to use, Toko finished in her head. She stopped short of voicing it and chuckled at her emotional outburst.
どれほどのものか想像がつかないのは確かだ。だがまあ、根本は変わらないさ。魔法がどのような奇跡神秘の類であれ、魔術師である以上、青子に勝ち目はない。
Dang, if only we had someone who punched real good. With those words, Bao's master walked out of the room, emphasizing that his role in all this was to face Aoko only at that very moment.
魔法ね。
I swear to God, if we're gonna, this is hyping it up a lot, because if we're gonna see her use the true magic, I'm pretty excited. The bored look in his eyes shifted. He also glowed a little bit. He recalled the taste of that girl, his long tongue sliding over his chainsaw-like fangs. Make no mistake, he would finish his meal. He was the oldest werewolf, the golden god of the forest. For as long as he could remember, no, from the moment he appeared, he had been the most powerful creature of all. All man-made mystics were trash before him. Magecraft was laughable, and mystic, artificial miracles, which even surpassed that, were superfluous, futile. Their very existence was an insult to him.
もちろん、そういう契約だし、ちゃんと平らげはするけれど。
Why don't we just get this guy a Baconator? Show him the wonders of that world. How is he? Oh, it's not invented yet. It takes place in the past. Gotta use true magic to invent the Baconator. That was the extent of their pact. Once he had dealt with this so-called true magic, he was free. His eyes burned with the wolf inside of him, his fanged maw twisting into a sadistic, beastly grin. It's not good. It's not good. When the child who knows not good and evil shows a sadistic grin, that can only lead to bad things. Oh, hello, title drop. I mean, chapter drop, but it was just past 7 p.m. Misaki High School's old building stood silently. While light from the city reached the area, the forest and the mountains kept the area hushed. Nothing unusual. During winter vacation, the old building, now still covered in yesterday's snow, was barely used. Without signs of life, such unused structures were mere monuments of what once was, nothing more. The old school building would remain that way until the start of the new semester. Behind it, the vast forest grew darker by the minute. If the building had died in just under 2 weeks of vacation, what had become of the forest over the years? The wall of overgrown trees filtered out the noise of the city and most of the moonlight. An otherworldly realm had taken root not even 2 miles from the town. Piercing the cold night air, footsteps crunched through the powdery snow.
この辺りに仕掛けはなさそうね。それでどうするの？このまま急行車に忍び込む？
I feel like Aqua's just gonna be like, so I'm just gonna start blasting.
まさか。私らがやってきたことなんてとっくにバレてるわ。隠れても意味はないし、何より敵のアジトに入ってどうするのよ。盗みが目的じゃないでしょ、今回は。
She's not some type of phantom thief. That's something going on right now in Fate Grand Order.
後ろから切りつけるのは強盗というのじゃなくて？それができれば苦労はないんだけどね。まあ、忍者の真似事は私というか、アリスの芸風じゃないでしょ。
Yeah, I don't think anyone in our, inventory of people would be what I call ninja. Like, we still haven't met someone? What the frick? Hold the phone. Who is that? I'm not gonna even mouse over them. Like I was saying though, there's no one here who I would describe as a ninja.
そもそも
Who haven't we met?
そもそもやる気満々なのはこっちもあっちも同じってこと。
The sound of their footsteps stopped in unison. The old, forgotten Misaki High School building stood before them. What used to be the schoolyard was now a barren snowscape. Reclaimed by the forest, the building looked like a shell of its former self. The surrounding trees resembled standing mourners at a funeral.
せっかちなお嬢さん方だ。タイムリミットまであと4時間はあるというのに。
It's always better to be early. Alone in the middle of the white altar was the lone, scarred red mage. As she came out from the forest, Aoko lowered herself slightly, scowling at her distant target. Next to her, Alice stood motionless. The bare branches of the trees cast long, thorny shadows. Aoko was reminded of Sleeping Beauty, except this mage wasn't nearly as pleasant as the princess in that. Not to mention she wasn't sleeping, and there was no prince. In fact, what did this have anything to do with Sleeping Beauty? Huh. Regardless, the princess came out of her schoolhouse castle to greet... Oh, is it because of Sleeping Beauty 2 Belle's Enchanted Wind her? It must be. Princess came out of her schoolhouse castle to greet her challengers.
その体で無理をして。あなたのそういうところ、姉としてどうかと思うわ、青子。
Aoko's just like playing Paper Mario with those critical strats, you know? Keep your HP low, do 4 times damage. Don't miss the perfect guards. Toko grinned faintly. Aoko fought back the urge to respond. Meanwhile, Alice stood in silence, uninterested in sibling rivalry. She's such an only child, you can tell. Toko stood about 100 feet away. With their senses sharpened through magecraft and the silence of the forest, They could hear each other perfectly. The golden wolf was nowhere to be seen. Toko faced the two girls alone. Alice's black overcoat and the winter hat were typical items of clothing for a mage battle. A few paces in front of her was Aoko, whose combat garb was comparatively out of place, a Misaki High School uniform. She had asked Alice to bring a change of clothes for her, but there must have been some misunderstanding. Though it was a trivial miscommunication, Toko seemed to think it had some special meaning.
ところで、始める前に一ついいかな。気になって仕方がないし、この先機会もないだろうから聞くんだけど。あなたの戦闘服ってそれなの？青子。
Hey, it's all about the aesthetic, you know? Toko spoke clearly and, despite the distance, was able to communicate her deep-seated scorn without trouble. Aoko would rather attack than engage in small talk, but she decided to take the bait.
そんなわけないでしょ。今までこういう機会が多かっただけよ。数えるなら今日を含めて4回しかないわ。ま、私はまだ現役だからそれも悪くはないかもしれないけど。
True.
いつか流行るでしょ、こういうのも。
The casual school uniform look? That's all the rage. Aoko was sure to emphasize her words. For a split second, Toko's eyes narrowed.
呆れたな。相変わらずのローセンスだ。
それはどうも。人形を実の妹に見立てる異常者にそう言われるなら、一周回って安心よ。
I'm gonna be honest. I'm having a hard time believing that we've finally actually reached the two of them butting heads. Like, it's something that has been so thought about for a long time, pretty much since Fate Extra, right? I mean, mind you, that's a very different take on them, but... With that, the two fell silent and glared at each other. Their bloodlust cut through the thick, cold air like a knife. While the two of them sized each other up, Alice surveyed the area around Toko. There was no indication anyone or anything was lying in wait near her. Perhaps she should see if the werewolf was still in the old school building. Maybe Toko didn't feel like Aoko and Alice were much of a threat in their injured state. Or she was really not expecting a counterattack so early, so the werewolf wasn't ready? After some contemplation, Alice surmised it was the former. She really was going to fight alone. Her arsenal comprised her mystic eyes and rune magecraft. That was more than enough to deal with Aoko and Alice in their current state. Alice, all I need is one shot. Aoko signaled to Alice behind her with a movement of her finger. Alice had no objections. The original plan was for her to keep the werewolf busy. With the mirror as a backup, Aoko was hoping to catch Toko off guard. Oh my god! Are you saying that the plan would be, remember the magic mirror that floats around the house? She's gonna use that to reflect the Infinity Eye back at her? A mirror to an infinite mirror? That can blow up the world, I feel. 'Cause infinity's one thing, but infinity back on infinity. They had a few other cards up their sleeves, but the fact remained that as mages, their attacks wouldn't affect the werewolf, so they decided to ignore it and focus on taking out Toko. Not the best strategy, but it was all the two of them could come up with. But they had been thrown a curveball. Toko had the upper hand, so she was reluctant to use the beast. Aoko wasn't about to let this opportunity go to waste. By distracting her with sibling banter, she would settle things before the werewolf even showed up.
じゃあ、今度はこっちの番ね。どう？結界の張り直しは進んでる？
まさか、昨日の今日よ。まだ手をつけてもいない。せいてはことを仕損じる。大体、私の目的は霊脈の奥にあるもので、結界そのものじゃない。張り直しは予定にないさ。まあ、土地を暴くなんて面倒な真似をするより、お前を暴いた方が早いのかもしれないが。
やっぱりそれが目的だったのね。ならなおのこと。あんたを魔法使いにするわけにはいかないわ。
Ako's blue eyes burned brightly with a fiery fighting spirit. Even though her sister was ready to pounce, Toko remained motionless, but for her mouth, which twisted into a smirk.
魔法使いか。確かにまだ執着はあるね。私には移植されなかった魔術刻印と青崎の伝える魔法の正体。だがもういいよ。惜しくはあるが、到達すればどちらも自分で用意できる。それとも、今ここで私のために魔法の正体を見せてくれるのかい？青子。
I see that capital M. I see that capital M. Toko's words came out flatly, but her eyes mocked her sister. It was true, however, that if Aoko wanted to defeat Toko, her best chance would be to use this mysterious true magic. The only problem was that, well, she couldn't. If she could, she would have used it to avoid being mauled last night. Aoko Ozaki couldn't use true magic. Toko believed she needed to fulfill some kind of condition. She needed to... Shut up. Wait, are you saying that she needs to lose the first round to gain enough magic circuits to pop it? Are you saying that it's her last arc and she needs to lose round 1 to get it because you can't possibly use it otherwise? Shut up, if that's what we're going to. The protection their grandfather placed in the formula was to prohibit miracles from being easily realized. However, that wasn't because he was concerned about the human world. It was no exaggeration to say he'd feel nothing of magic leveled the entire city. The truth was, true magic never had any conditions. Aoko was being held back by trauma. These 5 privileges, the only powers of their kind, were bound by cognitive seals. That's why Toko looked down on her naive little sister. So weak, a body incapable of handling magic can be cut down with a mere sword. Aoko knew better than anyone else, which is why she couldn't forgive her sister's ridicule. Just try using true magic, huh? A pathetic taunt. If that was how she wanted to play, then so be it.
お望みとあらばね。
Oh, she's going. With a burst of pure rage, Aoko made her move. Her colorless shoes sped across the untainted snowfield, like a stone skipping across the water. As Aoko charged forward, she disappeared. Only her footprints advanced like bullet holes in the snow. Toko held her ground. Concealment was elementary magecraft. More than likely, the power came from one of Alice's trinkets. It was a simple yet effective countermeasure to Mystic Eyes. Toko's Mystic Eyes used the lock property to bind an opponent. It did not have the Logos property to discern truth through an illusion. Once a magecraft's workings were revealed, its weakness was exposed.
足癖が悪いのも変わらず。
In a mere 4 seconds, her opponent had closed 10 yards and was still speeding up. It appeared that she had given up on a mage battle and was going to move in for melee. The other girl, Alice Kuonji, didn't take a single step.
被弾覚悟の特攻。アリスから5符でももらっているのでしょうけど、反省なさい、青子。切り札というものは、あくまで自己の力によるものを言うの。
God, that's a good phrase. Your trump card has to come from your own deck. Holy crap, I love that. Sneering, Toko raised her left arm, holding out in front of her threateningly. 10 more yards. Unfortunately, her footprints gave away her position.
そう。
So you can't see it, but she's absolutely waving it with a cigarette. It's very subtle. You can't see it here, but she is. Toko began engraving a rune into the air. But before she could finish, Aoko's footprints stopped. She was still too far away for close combat. What a strange place to end her attack. No, wait. Could she really stop so suddenly at that speed? She's doing a drop kick.
飛んだか。
Yeah! Toko made a snap decision. She quickly raised her outstretched arm toward the sky as if saluting the moon.
添える。
Flames tore through the air. The rune carved into the body above her, bathing it in a pillar of flames. No internal resistance spell could help. Rather than simply burning their targets, the runes wrapped them in a wreath of flame. It was Bird? The assailant screamed, falling onto the snow-covered ground. In agony, she extended a burning hand out from the hellish fire, as if begging for mercy. It was the stuff of nightmares. That's a bird! The snow melted as the fire burned the attacker alive. Chirp, chirp. The movement was far too theatrical to be Aoko. It's the frickin' bird again. Toko had already turned her gaze to Alice. She hadn't been watching the burning corpse at all. Toko knew it wasn't Aoko from the moment the body fell to the ground.
マインスターの使い魔は何匹いる
Irritated, Toko glared at Alice. While Aoko had vanished into thin air, she hadn't moved at all. Blue energy traced a circle around where she stood. It was force to forth. Sorry? Did you hear what I said? She needs to lose round 1 to gain 4 bars? A 4-bar Grand Magecraft mobilizing her magic crest. It's all melty, all the way to... Okay. I'm not gonna look up right now what her supers are in melting, but because there might be... I've been intentionally kind of avoiding thinking about them at all, just in case there's Mihoyo spoilers for Type Lumina, but 4 bars, baby. 4 bars. Toko only had single action runes. No, she hadn't mastered anything above 2 bars to begin with. Okay, why are we using the term bars? It's such a fighting game term. Like, you're writing this for me. This torrent of energy was too much to handle.
えい言わず
Oh, that's just her finger, isn't it? Huh. The rune formed in the magic circle. Ainwas, or Ainvas, the rune of withdrawal, was evoked and Aoko's concealment was undone, allowing Toko to utilize her mystic eyes. Within her open pupil, the infinitely mirrored eyes captured the target in an endless hell. But there's a mirror! The mage's sight was literally split in two. The space in front of Aoko distorted, obscuring her form like an icy mist. If Toko's eye was like opposing mirrors, then it's like sticking a one-way mirror at the triangulation point. With her vision split in two, she couldn't lock on to Aoko.
御水の鏡の効果よ、トウコさん。
Called it.
青子は鏡の Y 字路の奥にいる。一本道から見ているあなたに中心は見渡せない。
Frickin' sick. Alice explained without concern. Due to the herb Toko made Alice swallow, she was unable to use her own magecraft. However, she could use ploys already in motion without using magical energy, such as the mansion's mirror and the aimless little blue bird. Finally, the magic bullet was loaded.
セット、ルート、ディレクトカーラット。
Raising her right arm to reveal her luminescent crests, Aoko took aim at her target 100 feet ahead. Magical energy coursed through her gun barrel arm. From the moment she'd received Alice's invisibility, Aoko had begun chanting her magecraft. It took Toko a few seconds to notice. Aoko produced more spins in the awakened magic circuit than she had ever done before. She readied not snap, nor draw. Instead, she advanced past her third process, a compression of magical energy. Magic Blow, which is kind of a lame name, I'm gonna be honest. If she fired the blue ether that gathered before her, it would fly with the force of 10 tons. Using her magic crest to multiply the energy and machine gun her target, it was enough to demolish even the old building behind her. We're just saving them the cost of renovation. Let's do this! Aoko stared intensely at her sister, ready to fire. Toko had no time to counterattack or even the speed to evade. The fact that she didn't even move implied that she knew that better than anyone. Acceptance filled her eyes, not fear. Aoko didn't hesitate. She squeezed the trigger on her right hand. I won't hesitate, bitch!
スワープラスターマイン
Oh!
カイロ放て
Yes, Star Mine! I use that! I use that in Melty. The last word came out like a scream. Under the impact of the ether, the surrounding snow melted and flew around. Alright, Star Mine definitely doesn't do that when I use it. Toko was engulfed in dirt. No way could she survive Aoko's magic bullet. It contained every bit of Aoko's magical energy she could muster. Viewing the chaos, Aoko confirmed her victory. And yet, somehow she felt bitter. But then, choosing to deal with the torrent of magical energy she swallowed up later, Toko tooted at Aoko's childishness. Her disappointment was so deep it bordered on despair.
学ぶにしては遅すぎたが。まあ聞いておけ青子。
What is happening?
切り札というものは先に出した方の負けなんだよ。
Her voice cold and aloof, she was completely unscathed. The mage stood in the snowfield, not a single speck of dirt on her overcoat. Just before the bullet reached Toko, she deflected it with magical energy of the same level. Aoko could only stare at the scene before her. The negation of her magecraft hadn't shocked her, though. Leaf-like objects floated behind her sister. Aoko stared like she was living a nightmare. Countless magic crests poured out from Toko's back. Whoa! It all happened in an instant. The magic bullet approaching like a tsunami, Toko lightly snapping her fingers, causing a stream of letters to rush out from behind her. Text became art. Golden flowers bloomed. There must have been hundreds. All sorts of magecraft from even beyond Western Europe. North America? The kind normally carved into the flesh of a mage. The kind Toko Aozaki shouldn't possess. The kind only followers of those schools should know. Blossoming magic crests, brighter than the moon. Inscribed into the air, they formed a totem pole, a guardian beast to protect Toko. Actually, I have a question. Blossoming magic crests. I'm just curious about... never mind. For some reason, I thought Dan from Tsukihime Remake had perhaps blossoming magic crests, but she actually does not seemingly have anything involving... I thought she would have them like angel wings or something, but I guess I just simply looked at her wrong in my mind's eye. I try and normally look away from Dan, let's say. Anyways, stands. Okay. Didn't expect Toko to get a stand.
と、まあこういうわけだ。ベオだけに頼ってはいないことがよくわかったろ。
It's kind of kitschy. I don't know about that. It's kind of lame. Like, I'm gonna be real. I mean, I get what it's going for, but I think it's not that cool. I think it's just kind of whatever, you know? Toko's expression was steely. Victory was in her grasp, and there's no room to rest on her laurels.
姿を隠したのは鏡の応用か。探知や隔離だけでなく、援護まで行えるとはね。三大のプロイには含まれないものの、汎用性の面で言えば、あれも破格のプロイだな。
I do want to say, I did, and people who watch my videos will know, I did go and watch the Mysterious Heroine Double Cross, or Double X, as it is meant to be, a Valentine's Day scene, and she does absolutely randomly reference the big three in there. The three ploy kickshaws, just out of nowhere.
持ち上げるじゃない。何？騙された負け惜しみ？
いや、ただの自画自賛だよ。何しろ今のバージョンは私とマインスターの合作だ。趣味に興じすぎてあれこれと機能を足してしまったと今更ながら悔いているところさ。
Interesting.
その後、青子に見せかけて私に向かってきたのは例のコマ撮り。それに気を取られている間の大規模な魔術の発動。
That is a good strategy. I like it.
私の魔眼はアリスが防ぎ、青子は攻撃だけに専念する。組み立ては悪くはない。よくやったと言っておくよ。
Toko recounted their strategy, sharing her impressions as she went. Alice could not take her eyes off Toko's blooming magic crests. Only Alice was paying close attention to Toko's words. Sorry, Aoko couldn't stop looking. Alice paying attention to the words.
しかしそれもここまでだ。惜しいな青子。わずか2年であれだけの魔術を使えるのなら、あと数年もすれば一流の射手になっていただろうに。
Toko snapped her fingers again. The floating crests began to glow more brightly.
アリス、あれは何？
Aoko whispered to Alice, standing next to her as she held her hand. Aoko could not risk turning around. The second she took her eye off Toko, the fight would be over.
見ての通り、魔術刻印よ。信じられないけど。
Yeah, but how? Alice's voice was filled with shock and discomfort. Aoko shared Alice's sentiment. Magic crests were passed down through a family line and took unique forms. At heart, they were merely personalized inscriptions and technically no different from grimoires. However, the reality was far different. Magecraft had no set form. Without a set shape, the ability to recreate mystics was itself flawed. To craft it into a form required an immeasurable investment of time and devotion. Magic crests were the crystallization of a family's desires and ambitions and proof of a successor's lineage. Crests had no effect on their own, but they were the ultimate symbol of a family. If no mage was willing to imbue themselves with a crest or lacked the resolve to merge with it, then the crest's meaning was lost. That was the key difference between crest and a mere spellbook. Crests could not be shared, and imitating them was pointless. It only stood to reason, then, that even if crests manifesting behind Toko belonged to someone else, only the original owner could benefit from them.
でも、確かに私の魔弾は、あの刻印からの魔術で弾かれた。あれは、もしかすると。
I will say, I'm a large fan of the Studio Trigger explosions right there. Searching for answers, Ako squinted her eyes as she glared at Toko. She knew that copying a crest had no purpose. Only the original inheritor could invoke one. There was only one possible conclusion.
そう。肌に刻まず中空に浮かべてるのは、そういうこと。
Ako spat a curse at her sister. Toko nodded, pleased at her enemy's quick wit.
ああ、この体には合わないのでな。私の背後の空間に固定している。本当はね、お前たちのように肉に刻んだ方がいいんだ。魔術の起動が一動作で済むんだから。だが実際に使用するのなら、こうするしかない。起動までの手順は一つ増えるが、マイナスばかりでもない。所詮は人事なんでね。
And it seemed neither physically nor mentally. Ako knew her sister was inhuman, but she never thought she would go this far.
合うわけないじゃない。他人の魔術刻印を剥がしてるんだから、血筋の称号からして馴染むはずがないわ。で、奪われた連中は死ぬこともできず、今もどこかに生かされているわけだ。刻印の持ち主が死んだら起動すらできないものね、それ。
Oh, we got a, fate church thing where there's just like people locked up in the basement. Great.
トウコさん、あなた。
非難される覚えはないんだが、私はかかる火の粉を払っただけだよ。向こうから戦いを挑んできたんだから、戦利品ぐらいは用意してもらわないと。
Yep, you're a mage, all right.
まあ、中にはつまらない単語を口にしたバカ者もいるが、それはそれだ。むしろ優しいと思うけどね。私を殺しに来た連中をわざわざ生かしてあげてるんだから。
I'd rather die than be locked up somewhere and forced to live.
その魔術師たちがちゃんと人間の形をしてることを祈るわ。
お前ね、私を何だと思ってるんだ。脳だけ保存とか、面倒だから100人ひとまとめにした肉塊とか、そんな手抜きなんぞするものか。
I mean, I didn't assume that last one, but now I'm worried.
きちんとカフェを用意して、食事も娯楽も睡眠も自由に提供してるんだぞ。中には一生ここで暮らしたいなんて騒ぎ立てるバカもいるぐらいだ。
Is this the cafe that I'm thinking of? Are we getting the surprise drop that the mystical combining all universes cafe came from Toko? No. Toko's words were hardly believable, but it was clear her crests weren't copies. No, it's not Achanaberneherni, is it? Alice's scowl deepened. What Toko had described had no discernible benefit in her mind. I'm curious. Why had she gone to the trouble of stealing other mages' crests? It would have been more efficient to break down the crests into components and make replicas. For a skilled puppet master like Toko, she could have made a much more powerful puppet with those crests. It would have made a pawn loyal to her every command at that which... much more useful than any enslaved mage.
なんでそんなことを。そういう人なのよ、姉貴は。これで行くと決めたらそれしか目に入らない人なの。家庭より結果の人なの。ある日の話よ。テレビでピザの CM をやっててさ、私たちは唐突にあのデブ食を食べたくなった。
Already enthralled by what this story is going to be.
でも悲しいかな。一般家庭であるうちにあったのはサラミだけ。
Hey, at least there's no pineapple.
うちの実家、山奥にあるの知ってるでしょ。町まで行くのに1時間はかかる。
Are we really doing a long pizza story now?
我慢できなくて町まで行ったけど、ピザ屋なんか一軒もなくて、とぼとぼ帰ったの。
It was the tragedy of living in the countryside. Misaki, which had only recently got a conveyor belt sushi restaurant, would not see a pizzeria for another 2 years.
なのに骨折り損で家に帰ったら姉貴のやつおかえりとか手を振ってピザ食べてやがったのよ。
Are we really doing this during the big fight?
おせんべいを下地にしてみたわとか言って、外見たら鳥3羽と牛1頭丸々消えてて、
Oh!
ああこの女には10日交換とか手間とかお金の問題とかそういうの一切頭にないんだって思い知らされたわ。
An entire cow? Alice agreed that was pretty crazy.
そんな無茶なやつだからガンド打ちで目に見える傷跡を出そうなんて平気で考えるのよね。
All because of her frickin' terrible pizza.
あんなのゲマトリア一節分の栄唱で同じ効果を出せるのにあくまで呪術にこだわるから空も飛べない人形になるのよ、バカ兄貴。
The thought of the puppet doppelganger made her blood boil. It was clear to Aoko now that Toko had done it on purpose to annoy her. Toko furrowed her brow at Aoko's verbal assault. She had been stoic up until now, but speaking rudely about her prized puppet was crossing the line.
その人形に追い詰められたのはお前だったね。
I recall that puppet got some good hits in.
それとゲマトリアはカバラの秘術だ。私はルーン専門だからお前のように広く浅く知識を広める気はないよ。まあもっともこの刻印の所有者の一人からケルトの結界を教わりはしたがね。
Oh frick! Are we gonna use an Anthagabalga? I'm not even trying with these. The thing Kahulin uses to like say we have to fight one-on-one here. Toko looked to the crest over her left shoulder. Its shine was ever radiant, proving that its magecraft was active.
これは城で祖父を封じ込めるのに使っていてね。半人半用のドルイド層を閉じ込めたと。
Sorry.
とまではいかないが。そうだな。私では郵便ポストぐらいの大きさが限界か。
What do you mean half yokai? What? I used this castle seal. What do you mean he was half yokai? Arg. Are Toko and Aoko descendants of yokai, or is this just an insult?
ほら、昔お前が壊した赤いポスト。ちょうどあれぐらいの可愛い鳥小屋だよ。人間一人分をしまうには窮屈だろうが、祖父は肉体というより霊体に近い。見ようによっては、そっちの方がふさわしいかもしれないね。
Truly curious about more about the grandfather. Toko stifled a sinister laugh, her explanation chilling. Her cold veneer seemed to slip slightly when it came to her grandfather, her smile betraying the long-festering hatred she still clung to.
そういったわけでね。さっきの青子の魔術を防いだので、この刻印もしばらくは使用不能なんだ。今のが本当の魔法だったなら、 わずか産業の刻印では打ち消せなかっただろうに。青子、お前は僅差で負けたんだ。じゃあ、そろそろ終わりにしよう。抵抗をするのは自由だが、ベオ相手にそれは辛いぞ。
Oh boy. Ako snapped her fingers one more time. The golden werewolf was hiding in the old school building. The signal to him echoed eerily through the surrounding woods. Before the echo stopped, Ako shouted back at Alice.
行ってアリス
The order sounded like a reprimand, but Alice silently obeyed. Without hesitation, she left Aoko behind to handle Toko and made for the forest. If defeat was inevitable, it would be pointless for both of them to die. If one of them could survive, there could be around 3. That was why Aoko decided to be the sacrificial pawn.
トウコ自身の切り札も分かったし、アリスが本調子になれば勝てない相手じゃないものね。
Aoko muttered bitterly to herself as Alice's feet crunched through the snow. Instead of cursing her own death, she cursed the fact she would not see Alice defeat Toko. For what else was there to curse except this? Alice disappeared into the forest. Feeling her fellow mage's presence fade, Aoko continued to glare at her sister.
いつまでじらす気？私、待たされるのは好きじゃないんだけど。
Speaking of waiting, the werewolf Toko had called was nowhere to be seen. It should not have taken him more than a few seconds to come flying out of the old school building.
そうせくな。今赤ずきんを追っているところだ。
Oh no.
黒帽子の彼女をそう例えるのはやや無理があるがね。
Her tone reeked of irony. The words traveled aimlessly across the schoolyard like a rambling announcement. Well, I guess we're gonna get to see Sojiro save Alice instead. Ako stood frozen and dumbfounded. Everything Toko was saying seemed so far away from reality. Ako was done with being fooled, so she turned around. The moonlight shining off the fallen snow allowed her to see far into the forest. From within the white darkness, a lone boy came into view walking toward her. He could not have been any taller than Aoko's chest, but he carried Alice over his shoulder with ease. As if she was nothing, he tossed her body upward. She arched through the air several feet before dropping headfirst before Aoko's eyes. Her neck would snap on impact. Oh no! Ooh! Even though she was wiser not to, Aoko reached out and caught her. Alice's light body weighed heavy as she fell into Aoko's arms. The stitches on her wounds tore. Oh no! Dyeing Aoko's arms crimson. Aoko gritted her teeth, fighting the pain that shot through her body and the sensation of warm blood.
アリス、無事。
Dang! Dang! Just got her with the launcher! Alice did not respond, but Aoko could see that she was at least conscious. The werewolf must have ambushed her right after she ran into the woods. Alice bled heavily from where the wolf tore her abdomen open last night, just like he had done to Aoko.
初めから森に潜ませていたとはね。
Cursing her own carelessness, she gently lay Alice's body down. She set her sights on the blonde-haired boy, her new target.
つまり、あれよね。甘く見ていたふりで、初めから余裕なかったんだ。
Oh, you are just scrunkly. Even in the face of Aoko's rage, he did not stop smirking. He stared back at the girls, eyes gleaming, twinkling with excitement for the brutality to come. The blonde hair and green eyes she saw last night, and his effeminate features now, seemed ethereal, like he had changed into a being from another planet.
ベオ、今日は食っていいぞ。
Toko's voice echoed from afar. The boy's grin broadened. Nobody could have expected what came next. Aoko rushed headfirst at the boy. Faster than the robin decoy, she sped, blood dripping from both arms. Toko watched wide-eyed at the spectacle. Alice could only look on with vacant eyes as she lay helplessly on the ground. The werewolf boy was caught off guard by the prey becoming the predator. Yo, she's going in! She's going in with the kick! Aoko crossed a 20-foot gap in a second before planting a foot in the snow. It arrested her momentum and pivoted her body like a top. Aoko's gonna smoke a child. Even if he instantly understood what was coming, the boy wouldn't be able to dodge in time. Using the momentum from her sprint, she pushed her leg into the ground and sprang up. This is one of her moves too. This is the end of her little Rekka there. With deadly timing, the roundhouse kick swung in a wide arc towards the boy's neck, sending an explosion of force to his brain stem. Dang. Also, Aoko's spats confirmed. Very interesting. It was an expert display of martial arts strengthened by magical energy. She'd gotten the hang of close combat while fighting Toko's puppets. The violent kick was powerful enough to shatter a tree trunk. The boy did not move. Aoko's right shin connected firmly and stopped. A shockwave rippled through his neck. It was the same feedback Aoko had felt when she destroyed the puppet. Even if she wasn't defeated, she had to have severely damaged his spine. Even if he wasn't, rather. As she looked at him to confirm her kill, the boy simply stared back at her, not even bothering to twitch an eyebrow.
お姉さんの右足は確か噛み切った方だ。
That's almost a comedically long leg, but I mean, it's because of the action, it's
それで
fine.
首を狙ったのはすごいよね。女の人は本能的に自分の体をかばうものだってトウコさんは言ってたのに。
You're gonna bite it again.
けど残念。せっかくの勇気も無駄でした。僕の体毛の質はこの姿でも変わらない。産毛だけでもお姉さんの蹴りを受け止めることはできる。
You don't have that, buddy. The only one hurt between the two of them was Aoko. The leg she had lodged into his neck was totally numb, like it had been chopped off clean with a hatchet.
それに
I hate that when I read that, my leg started to hurt.
くっつけたばっかりの足だからかばったでしょ。
I hate how empathetic I am when I'm reading this, because as soon as I read that, my leg was like, hey, do you want to know what that feels like, buddy? Here you go.
人間が僕の相手をするならそんなこと気にしちゃいけないのに。ああ、でも。
The boy smiled, basking in Aoko's shock and awe. She could not free her leg. No doubt as soon as she regained her footing, he would tear her stomach open.
どっちにしろミンチだから気にしても仕方がないよね。
That's terrifying. Oh god.
もったいない。せっかく治ったばかりなのに。
Aoko was not sure, but it felt like he had sunk his finger into the flesh of her right leg. He was right about her leg. She barely had any feeling in it. It had been completely paralyzed after the last attack, and was now back in the same horrid state. Except this time, instead of being torn to pieces, it had been crushed to the bone. Oh no! Her leg might have been numb, but just the look of it was enough to horrify her. The way it crumpled, all that blood. Any normal person would have died from shock. Ugh! As if thinking about someone else, Aoko considered how cruel magic crests could be. Oh, people get messed up in this.
あれ、まだ目が死んでない。
Oh, this is such an image. One Piece film red, am I right?
あんまり苦しめたくないんだけど。頑丈なのも考えものだよ。
This is so weird that this is all Anya. I can't hear it. The boy thrust his hand at Aoko's chest. Her consciousness flickered from the sudden pain of a stake, no, a child's fist piercing her torso. The scenery flew by. She soared through the air like a rag doll tossed away by a bored child. Just like Alice a moment ago, she fumbled through the air and hit the ground hard. Her right leg was crushed, her chest caved in. It was as if her heart had been scooped out of her chest. Each gasp of breath left her wanting more. Was this what it was like to see stars? The terrifying part was the pain. It never let up. Desperately trying to suck in oxygen, she could still feel his fist. Leisurely, the boy strolled across the snow toward Aoko's broken body, his red tongue gliding over his lips. He stared at his prey, who was desperately trying to breathe, his eyes filled with glee. Aoko bit down the temptation to drift away, even though she could find no reason to fight on. The snow had broken her fall slightly, but her death was all but certain. The fist-sized crater in her chest and her mangled leg made sure of that. Even though she knew she was a broken mess, her magic crests frantically worked to resuscitate her heart, but why? The sight of Toko in the distance was the only thing that kept her conscious. Her sister looked surprised for some reason, like she was witnessing some strange phenomenon. That wasn't like her. Wondering what it was, Hako tried to stay conscious. Feebly trying to raise her head, she looked to where Toko was staring. I swear to God, if it's my boy. Why did she look like that when she was so close to victory? Is it my man? Is my man gonna come running in? My man, it's Christmas! His heart was beating faster than normal. Yo, it's the theme! The fragmented and disturbing images kept returning, and he desperately pushed them to the back of his mind. They were his thoughts that shook his resolve. He did his best to file them away into an unseen corner of his consciousness. I love this song now so much. Right now, he could only focus on controlling his breathing and his exertion. Just stay calm, he repeated to himself. He had not stopped for a second since leaving the church, even without giving a thought to what he would do next. So many traffic lights, so many people. It was Christmas. There was no way he could find a taxi. Waiting for one was not an option. It's why he put his trust in his legs. He dashed through the city streets. He had to find a shorter route than last night. His heart was ready to jump out of his chest, pounding like a hammer against a fire bell. He had no intention of giving up yet, but he could not seem to calm himself down. In his precarious condition, even surrender seemed too great of an effort to spare. Visions of horrible outcomes flashed through his mind. No, calm. He needed to stay calm. That was his only weapon. He was painfully aware he was powerless. The best thing he could do was to keep his head on straight. While he wrangled with his mind, his pulse seemed to quicken with every step. The forest was faintly lit by the moon. That was more than enough on such a bare mountain. He followed the two sets of footprints. Ahead lay a situation he had nothing to do with, just like at the amusement park. Even if you go, there's nothing you can do for them. The only effect her admonishing words had was to hasten his pace. He pushed the ground with his legs even harder, trying to leave his doubt in the kicked-up snow behind him. Of course he was powerless. The pain in his chest told him so. At best, he would be useless. At worst, he would be a liability. He recalled the binding spell placed on him at the church. It did not matter. His body told him he would regret being torn to pieces, less than if he did nothing. Not once did his legs fail him as he ran through the woods, though it felt as though his heart could at any moment. His weakness screamed at him from within. Just like back at the amusement park. He was beyond reason or circumstances now. Ultimately, I just want to help her. That was all he really desired. His heart pounded with vigor. As he ran through the dark, wintry forest, only one thing gnawed at his mind. Not concern for the girls, nor anger toward Toko. The red roses bursting forth from her limbs. Screams of agony like childbirth. The harsh reality of something beautiful dying. The nightmare was tenacious. Never again. Ever again did he want to see something like that again if he could help it. Oh, buddy, guess what you're gonna see? Oh, no. Just ahead was the forest clearing. The moonlight shone on the old school building like a spotlight. Once again, those thoughts crept back. He could not bear seeing something like that again. That was why he ran. But if he had to face it a second time, how could he stay calm? With that thought in mind, he arrived at the clearing. Somehow his frantic breathing, his rising and lowering shoulders stopped. No exhaustion, no inertia, just blankness. like his mind was frozen in time. This was the second time he felt like this. But the nausea and dizziness from the first time, the pathetic whining of the last few weeks, the doubts clouding his mind, they were all gone, displaced entirely from his mind by an even stronger emotion. His heart pounded with the force of a sledgehammer. It was a primal sound loud enough to bring him to his senses. Whoa, my man gets his first combat CG. And he's got breathing going on. Sodro stepped into the clearing, letting out a deep but steady exhale. Although his eyes were locked with the blonde-haired boys, his concentration was focused inward. Be calm. Be calm. He is stanced the frick up. Every fiber of his being worked to control his breathing. Sojiro is going to throw hands with a child so hard. The clearing told the story of Aoko and Alice's crushing defeat. Aoko was lying face up in the snow, her right leg bright red and crushed at the thigh. Her eyes were glazed over, but Sojiro could tell she was still bravely fighting. Judging by her spluttering, she had taken a hard blow to the chest or something. Sojiro deduced that it was most likely both. Alice's injuries seemed less serious than Aoko's, but she lay motionless on the ground nevertheless. She was lying across from Aoko, face down in the snow, arms out in front as if pushing herself up was too painful. Before the old school building stood the figure of the maid she had seen before. Paying her no mind, Sojiro began to walk forward. Feeling calmer since arriving at the clearing, he advanced toward Aoko. Toko did nothing to stop him. No one noticed, but the faint look of worry flickered in her eyes.
お兄さんもその人たちの仲間?
The child werewolf spoke amicably, confident in his victory. Perhaps also eyeing up a new meal I love. It's very light, but you can hear him taking slow, methodical footsteps towards the girls. Sojiro ignored him and kept walking toward Aoko. The complete disregard wiped the smile from the boy's face. Still, Sojiro carried on. The beast's feelings were the last thing on his mind. Once he reached Aoko, he looked down at her with a pained expression on his face. Strangely, he was at a loss for words. After slight hesitation, all he could manage to say was,
なってないぞ、生徒会長。行く時ぐらい声をかけるものだろう。
He's so simple. His awkward remark was half scolding and half affectionate.
このバカ.
Despite the pain in her stomach, Aoko was able to throw an insult his way.
安心した。余裕あるじゃないか、青崎。
His voice brightened, as if buying her bravado. The truth was that she barely had the strength to live. Despite that, Sojiro looked like he wanted to respond in his usual way. Something like, "See, Aozaki, you're too tough to die, even when someone kills you." That's on purpose. You know they did that line on purpose. I see you, translators.
あんた.
As soon as she tried to speak, she ran out of breath. Sojiro heard her loud and clear this time. He might have looked absent-minded, but he knew exactly how dangerous the situation was. Oh god. Aoko knew because his carefree-sounding words did not match his expressionless face. I don't know. There's some expression there. That's reaching levels of dorseless I've never seen.
何のつもりで?
I'm gonna be honest. I know there's some people that are probably gonna be like, oh, it's gonna be so lame when it reveals that he's a true ancestor and just completely wipes the floor with them. Nah, I'm fine if he busts out some secret bloodline technique now and goes sicko mode. That's cool too. Before she could say doing, she coughed painfully. Sojiro pressed his finger to his lips and nodded. Aoko could not believe it, but it looked as though Sojiro had gestured to her to not speak.
だってほら、状況はあの時と一緒だ。君がやられたら、次はこっちの番なんだろ だから協力をしに来たんじゃないか。まあ、何もできないのも、あの時と変わってはいないんだけど。
It's really funny to actually have a character who's like, if you ever need anything, I'll be there. I'll be the one there for you when things are bad. I'll be the one to protect you and save you. And like, here's the thing. Unlike a lot of those various characters, this guy has nothing. Like, he actually is worthless. Now, in his worthlessness, he finds a way, but Ako did not know what to say. She could only look up at him, amazed and awed. The werewolf stared at them, visibly frustrated. After all, he believed himself to be the noblest of all creatures. Ignoring him was treason, punishable by death. Had Toko not been there, he would have sunk his teeth into Sojiro's neck by now. He was sure he had been intimidating enough. Oh my god, he's also wearing a choker. He's wearing a baby Spencer's choker. However, his prey did not show any signs of fear. It was hard to imagine, but maybe, just maybe, this guy did not view him as a threat. Oh. Are we gonna learn that Sojiro is actually an older werewolf? Is that what we're gonna go with? No. He's a... Wait. He lived in the mountains. Is he gonna be a Tengu? Oh my god, hold up, wait. Maybe. This guy did not view him as a threat.
まあ誰でもいいんだけど、筋張った肉は歯ごたえがあっていいし、何より食い出がある。先にそのお兄さんから始めても構わないよね。
The boy wolf called out once again. Still not responding, Sojiro raised a hand to his nose. Cool, calm, and collected, paying no mind to the boy yet keeping an eye on him.
匂うな。
Who farted?
Hmm?
Everyone present was confused. No one else seemed to be able to smell anything but it. Well, you know what they say, whoever smelt it dealt it. Yo, what if Toko farted?
へえ。何が匂うっていうのかな、お兄さん。
Beiwa's voice retained his usual arrogance, but was tinged with impatience. The boy wasn't able to hide his irritation at being ignored. Finally, Sojiro turned to face the boy, just a short distance from him. Oh my
品
god,
のない
yes.
肉の匂いがする。これだから犬は嫌いなんだ。
Wait, is he gonna be a Nekomata, maybe? Because we made that joke, but... Well, I mean, it wasn't a joke, that was a real thing. His voice was filled with disgust and contempt. Sojiro was mainly speaking to himself, but the werewolf boy had never felt so insulted, even if that was not Sojiro's intent at all. In a moment, the wind picked up, perhaps signaling a change in the werewolf's mood. A fiery gale whipped around, carving patterns in the snow.
ソジロ。
Sensing he was about to be killed, Ako desperately tried to move, but her broken body would not respond. After hearing Sojiro's insults, Alice was unsuccessfully struggling to get to her feet too. In complete contrast, Sojiro stood there, firmly and unfazed. The little blonde boy's well of patience had run dry.
そうか。要するに、僕が子供だからって舐めてるんだね。お兄さんは。
That's a scary face. Also, I just noticed he does have pointed ears. His time. Whoa! Sad! No, not this time. It's green eye. It's super not. That's kind of sick, though. That's really cool. His time playing human was over. Enraged, the boy transformed. He grew larger and larger, golden fur sprouting from his pale flesh. His mouth grew razor-sharp fangs, his hands grew claws. Drawing from the magical energy in the air, he transformed into a preternatural beast, a wolf in the shape of a human.
中華の許しは出していないぞベオ
Toko yelled at him, but the werewolf did not respond. He only huffed deep breaths of hot air.
そんなバカな話が。
Please be like, did you just put on your fursuit, bro? Cringe! That was all Sojiro could say in response to the boy's metamorphosis. Such a transformation was the stuff of nightmares. What was worse, the beast now towered above him. It was enough to make anybody question reality itself.
驚いた。
Seeing his prey's reaction satisfied the werewolf, and his maw twisted into a satisfied grin. He was a strange one, this guy, but meat was meat. However, the beast's arrogance was short-lived. The prey breathed a sigh of exasperation before speaking.
それじゃあ本当に犬そのものじゃないか。
He didn't know. He's like, I just got a dog-like energy from you. That's really funny. You could hear a pin drop even in the snow. My man. Aoko, us, and Toko were all dumbfounded. He can say the stupidest shit whenever he needs to. Were they really seeing a human not just stare a werewolf down, but insult it to its face? They simply could not believe it. Look at this guy. This dude. This guy. Like, you would, if I showed this picture, I would not expect that he's, you know, right now on the verge of getting ripped apart. He's pissed. It was too late. Any trace of the wolf's pride or dignity faded away. The onlookers finally realized that the wolf was serious.
ベオ殺すな
But Toko's command fell on deaf ears. The wolf prepared to lunge, his emerald eyes fixed on Sojiro not 30 feet in front of him. A mere 30 feet. A half second was all he needed. Another half second to bring his claw down and slice his prey from head to toe.
死んだよお前
What is he going to do? A roar of joyous, unbridled fury, or fury, am I right, echoed far and wide. It was the only warning the werewolf gave as he exploded towards Sojiro. 1 second. A golden blur swept forth in a furious gust, too fast for eyes to follow. In the face of unworldly speed, there was only one thing to do. Piss your pants? Sojiro stepped forward. Why? Buddy, what are you doing? A silent shadow opposite the beastly silhouette of the incoming werewolf. He needed exactly 3 paces. He bet his entire life on around 3 feet of distance. What are you doing? In the blink of an eye, death would be upon him. Yet he did not show the slightest indication he intended to avoid the lunging behemoth. The wolf's forelegs slammed into the ground with earth-shaking fury. My man, what are you gonna do? His back muscles tensed up so much they seemed barely contained in his frame as he swept a raised paw downward. Sojiro's small step neatly evaded the claws, but he had a different motive. He was merely positioning himself for the next move. His intention was never to avoid anything. From the beginning, his mind was focused on but one thing. One point to aim for.
Is he going for the nuts?
One mind. One breath. He picked the perfect opening in the wolf's torso, the precise microsecond between contraction and relaxation. That one point alone was the crack in the dam of life. Is my man doing a 1-inch punch? What the frick is this image? What the frick is this image? He punched the werewolf in its chest with his feeble human strength. Oh! Okay. My whole thing of Sojiro's bloodline technique is gone. This kid's arm is dust. There was a dull thud and a burst of blood. The twisted flesh and gore were all Sojiro's own. The werewolf raised its claw, convulsed. From an insignificant impact, the beast's body was the first to collapse, then his spirit. There was a moment of incomprehension. The wolf opened his jaws to try and pull air into his lungs. Gasping, he began to topple forward. The slender figure slipped around to his flank. Yo! What? What the frick? The next blow pierced him like a spear. Ignoring his mangled left arm, the silhouette whirled around and drove his right elbow into the collapsing werewolf's back. Oh my god, your arm is absolutely destroyed. There was another muffled impact. The second strike penetrated to the exact same spot the first strike had, crushing the beast's heart. This time, the blood that flew into the air belonged to the gasping wolf. Your arm, buddy! Jeez! The werewolf fell to the ground, choking on his own blood. He did not get up. He showed no sign of life. It was over. There was no remorse, no hesitation, that brief act of violence. The perfect, furious golden beast lay still, felled in a mere 3 seconds. I have a question. What was the name of the teacher in Fate Stay Night? Kuzuki? Kuzuki Fate. Soichiro Kuzuki. No. Now, I may be stupid, but was he in the mountains his whole life because he was training at a assassin's lifestyle thing? I did note previously that their names were similar, but it legitimately never crossed my mind that that would be anything more than a coincidence. We'll see. No sane person would have bet on this outcome. His breathing calm, the victor stood over the fallen behemoth's body. Me too, bud. Even as the beast lay crumpled in the snow, he could not grasp what had happened. His heart had ruptured, cutting the blood flow to his body and brain, leaving him helpless. That much he knew. If he were a normal creature, he would be dead. As it was, this was not a trifling inconvenience. Once his heart was repaired, his body would heal as well. It was not as if he had been struck by magecraft exceeding his own mystical nature. This was little different than a grazed knee. Which was what was so strange. Your heart does not stop from a grazed knee. The werewolf frantically searched his memory. He managed to remember right up until the moment he raised his claws. But what had come after that? Given the right transformation, he knew he could withstand even a cannon blast. How had the puny humans dropped him? Wait. Before that, he had to figure out exactly what his opponent did to him. The moment he got in close, yes, he felt a small impact. The attack was so accurate that it probably only affected his heart. Ridiculous. Even if that was possible, there was no way that alone could stop a werewolf's heart. In the end, no matter how much he thought about it, nothing added up. The answer was out of reach for a werewolf with no knowledge of being backed into a corner, let alone the limits of human skill. Only one thing was certain. He had lost. He tried to piece together the sequence of events. The explosion in his chest, the flash of white. After that, he was falling over. He took another blow to his back. That was the one that disrupted his heart. Is that why he's like, you have to respect bears, because he was up there fighting to one-punch bears this whole time? Could lose? Indeed. It was physically impossible. The boy gnashed his teeth and tensed his body in indignation at this unfair conclusion.
他の生き物に負けるはずが。
Enough thinking. He was ready. From the ground, he glared at his enemy to the side.
負けるはずが。
The very next moment, an unknown type of pain coursed down his spine. It had eyes. Cold eyes. Staring. Piercing. Colorless. The moon looked more alive. Its arms were broken. Its inhumanly powerful attack had mangled them beyond recognition. It was in pain. If it was in pain, it would have cried out. But it was silent. Was it ever alive? What? Where are we going with this? Okay, maybe my idea is not right. And what? Those dead eyes. He'd seen eyes like those before. Those eyes without hatred, without joy, without any feeling behind them at all. It was a mindless insect. The werewolf's hair stood on end. What was this creeping chill crawling up his spine? Having never experienced fear, the werewolf did not know what had become of him. Despite countless clashes against other mystics, it had been a human that broke him. He knew beasts even larger than himself. He knew legendary creatures like himself. He did not know this. He'd never met, much less imagined, a human-sized bug. Why are we calling him a bug? Is that a metaphor? Or is there what? See, now my brain's going to...
Is this like the giant's... Is he like a human reincarnation of the giant centipede that Tawa Tota fought, or...?
The chill ran down the werewolf's spine. Was so vicious it threatened to split him in two. If he moved even an inch, it would crush his skull underfoot. In spite of the despair gripping him, the boy paradoxically sensed that his opponent would not move at all. This human would exhibit no further violence. It was a creature, no, a stone that held no animal instincts. It masqueraded as a human. Okay, we're from the perspective of Beowulf right now, and I want it to be like this, and I want us to cut to Sojiro, and I want it to be that he's just completely, from the pain and shock of breaking his hand, has just shut down and is just standing there unable to move. Right? But I don't know. The contradiction grated against his heart, his values. A phantom pain born a phantom bane. Oh. You're a big guy for you, something. I can't even think about that copy pasta right now. A phantom pain born from an unknown emotion, fear. It wasn't just grating, it was like many needles slowly digging into his heart. This had been his first taste of doubt, of reality. Such contradictions existed in the world after all. They were irrationalities and questions you did not want to hear the answers to. The suppressed pain suddenly flowed through his body like a raging river. This was also a first. Until now, he had always been able to control pain. He had never known what it was like to tremble. An elemental might have even felt sorry for him if it were to watch. Nice little reference to elementals. How sad. Born complete, yet lost in the lunacy of the human world. This is just like that moment in Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog where Captain Hammer first feels pain. His heart had fully regenerated. Howling in mental agony, the beast clutched his own trembling body. Those eyes, those human eyes, looking straight through him. And then the boy realized the only reason he was still alive. Even with both arms broken, the human could have finished him off with his legs. But it mattered not, because his opponent was giving him a taste of his own medicine. This was not revenge for trying to kill him. This was revenge for the wounds he inflicted on the girls. The absurdity of all made his throat tighten. His breathing was frantic. This human had no sense of self. It had no concern for its own safety when it stood between him and the girls. That must be why it had no hate or fear, or perhaps even intent to kill. Indeed, the fact he was alive had nothing to do with the human's will. God, this image, holy crap. The fight was machine-like, so was its judgment. An eye for an eye, and nothing more. If the werewolf had killed one of the girls, this exchange would have ended differently.
殺していたら殺されていた
He shuddered at the thought. He had never entertained such a possibility. He had never had to, because he was supposed to be the one exception to the rule. Agony kicked him hard in the gut. No matter the mystic, nothing was immune from injury, from decay. The boy finally understood an obvious law of the world. Or rather, he had been taught.
殺されてた間違いなく
Those eyes, they would not stop staring down at him. Retribution was a universal law. He was now painfully aware of that fact. And yet, the one who brought form to this idea was this human. The pain of defeat, the pain in his heart, the pain of comprehending the incomprehensible. Pain. The impossibility of it all had shattered his perfect world. It ate at him, consumed every fiber of his being. The doubt made his head spin. It was too much. Humans were impossible to understand.
殺されてた殺されてた殺されてた
He had not been made to face the death of another, but his own. Unable to cope, he reverted to his human form. Quietly, he shivered like a frightened child in a mother's lap. Still lying in the snow, Aoko choked on her words, unable to entirely comprehend what had unfolded.
宗十郎あんた
She could not hide the trembling in her voice.
何
Speaking in his usual way, Sojiro nonchalantly turned toward her.
何って今自分が何をしたか分かってんの
She shouted angrily, as though he had done something wrong. Sojiro looked surprised, wondering what on earth he had done to upset her, because for him, this is just normal. He just did the normal thing. He lowered his gaze back to the wolf boy. Knitting his brow in dismay, Sojiro finally realized what Aoko was referring to.
心外だな。青崎は分かってると思ってた。
He looked at her in disappointment.
分かってるって何をよ
Feeling slightly affronted, Aoko responded curtly. Sojiro sighed.
山じゃ、熊はそう珍しいものじゃない。以前、確かに言ったじゃないか。
It was the bear thing. That face! Aoko's jaw dropped. It took her a moment to process what he had just said. She recalled some meaningless conversation or other from who knows when.
君、もしかして俺をバカにしているのかまったく。なんで熊を倒すためなんかに修行しなくちゃいけないんだ。
Yes. Now she thought about it. They had spoken about that. He had mentioned being familiar with large beasts, and she couldn't deny that she'd heard him utter some anachronistic nonsense about training to deal with them. Which meant he's used to dealing with animals larger than himself. If he'd lived that sort of life that involved run-ins with wild bears, then a man-wolf might only have been surprising, but not particularly frightening. Aoko hung her head. After all this time, who was it that really made no
参
sense?
ったわあなたの勝ちよ宗十郎
It was hard to tell whether she spoke in admiration or exasperation. Either way, as she slouched in the snow, Aoko spoke quietly enough so that only she could hear her words. Toko, on the other hand, understood exactly what had transpired. Bayo lay fallen, now just a sobbing boy. And another boy stood over him with two shattered arms. Nearly fatally wounded, Akunalis still could not stand, but she had recovered enough to breathe. But had, rather. As for Toko, she had only a few tricks up her sleeve, maybe 3 or 4 more runes at best. The magic crests on her back were unusable. She could use the remaining magical energy from the field imprisoning her grandfather, but that would be stupid. If she released her grandfather, she would lose ownership of the sacred ground. Failing to defeat Aoko and Alice would now mean starting over from square one. She could not afford that. The sibling rivalry had to end. Toko had gambled everything on her surprise attack, using the fact she was still in Aozaki to infiltrate Misaki's defenses. For 3 years, she had labored selling her work to the association, and she'd used 20 years' worth of hair to mobilize an army of familiars. It was now or never.
だが、私は失敗した。
She had overestimated the werewolf's power. It should have been enough. Against mages alone, Beowulf by himself would have been enough to ensure complete victory. But things did not always go according to plan. Beo's incredible strength was conditional. She knew he was not infallible, why hadn't she prepared a contingency plan? Her heart as cold as ice, Toko stared at Sojiro, who stood tall. His arms were a hideous mess. The arm he used to strike Beo head-on barely even resembled an arm. His bones were bent out of shape. His muscles were torn to shreds. To say his arm was simply broken would be a gross understatement. Streams of crimson ran down his other arm onto the white snow. The elbow he drove into Beo's back was likely shattered, and his muscles and tendons were tore up to his shoulder. Judging from the state of his arms, it was doubtful he'd be able to use them again. Worse than his arms were his left leg, and no doubt his internal organs too. He'd used the leg to take the full brunt of Beo's charge. At first glance it looked fine, but it was now a useless hunk of meat attached to his torso. I don't like that description. His insides were worse. Supporting the weight of Beo had ruptured his spine, causing widespread internal bleeding. Basically, he was a dead man standing. A bird with clipped wings. Living like that would not be living at all. He could barely stand, let alone fight again. In contrast, the collapsed werewolf was unscathed. Only once had he coughed up blood. The majority of the pool of red on the snow was Sojiro's, a crimson tapestry telling the story of the boy who stood strong and defeated a werewolf.
当然だ。衝撃には反動が伴う。
Yep.
拳を振るうのなら相応の負担がある。まして相手は人狼。走ってくる鉄の壁を真っ向から殴るようなものだ。それを。
Perhaps he had known what would happen. Animals instinctively limit their strength in order to protect their body. Compensating for physical weakness with intellect and technique was humanity's forte, and that clash had shown humans at their very best. And yet, it had also been beyond human. He had attacked without concern for his own safety. Without self-preservation in mind, he could go beyond human capability. Enough to strike through the steel-like fur of a legendary werewolf. But who would have thought that a beast able to withstand a shot from a tank would be felled by a mere human?
いや、違う。ためらうことなく殴りつけたから壊れたのではない。初めからあれは壊すことを前提にしていたな。
Oh yeah, he went all the way in because he knew he had nothing to hold back on, right? Like if he held back, you know, he wouldn't be doing it. So wild. He sacrificed his entire body to destroy Beo's heart. Toko felt a chill come over her as she went over in her head what had transpired. It should have been a nightmarish scene, but she was captivated by the supreme display of physical rationality. From the outside looking in, she had witnessed not an accident, but a rational consequence. In that instant, the boy had put his entire being into piercing Beo's chest. As soon as he laid eyes on Aoko and Alice, he committed himself fully to the task. He sized Beo up, synchronized his breathing, found his weak point, and calculated the exact position, timing, and distance he would need to hold his ground. This isn't a normal guy. He was in the mountains as training to be an assassin, in the same place as Soichiro Kazuki. Come on. He knew what he had to do to win, and he did it with everything he had. It had nothing to do with instinct. A wild creature would not have tried to beat something it could not. Only a human would risk his life when faced with the impossible. That contradiction fed his attack. He twisted his body from heel to his neck to focus his energy. If Bayo had simply tried to run Sojiro down, the werewolf probably would have won, but the beast wanted to rip him to shreds, or rather, he was baited into doing so. After Bayo charged, when he planted his feet, he raised his claw and then swung downward, putting himself off balance. His pulse was erratic, his movement wild. In that moment, he was vulnerable. That was when Sojiro made his move. The beast had overwhelming power, but it was sloppy, whereas the human had concentrated all of his meager power into a single point for a single, perfect cross counter. That was how the human shifted the balance in his favor. The follow-up elbow would rupture Bayo's heart. It was a graceless second strike, a sloppy blow no different from Bayo's. The elbow was only able to penetrate the beast's golden fur because of the first attack to his chest.
あの時点でベオは丸裸にされていた。無敵の人狼がその機能の一切を休止させられた。
I cannot wait to see this animated.
つまり
I want to see this movie. The strike was not meant to break, but to disable. All living creatures had weaknesses. No matter how strong the creature, it had weak points and weak moments. Not just physically, but mentally too. A time when they aren't in their best shape, unable to focus or find motivation. Sickness or a lack of sleep or food, for example, can cause the body's rhythm to go to sync. For a variety of reasons, intelligent beings risk losing their ability to function properly. Legendary beasts were no exception.
弱点、欠点をつく魔術なら知っているが、すべてを投げ打って弱点を生むとはな。
Essentially, it's like when you're playing a game and you use an attack that says, I give you, as I punch you, I give you this element, and then the next attack is, I have an attack that's super effective on that element. The boy's strike to the heart was not an attempt to kill Bayo. It was designed to create a weakness in something that had none. The elbow attack took advantage of that break in Bayo's invulnerability.
加えて、笑えることに不意打ちですらない。ベオの神経の伝達速度なら、毒が当たった瞬間に感知し対応できる。だが、そもそもそれを毒と認識できなければ、変形のしようもない。毒ではないものが毒になるなんて落とし穴。誰が教えてやれるものか。
Or how do you teach something can be a threat to something that has never had a threat? In comparison to it, she was frustrated, to say the least. The boy was totally committed, utterly selfless. He bet his life on that single moment without expecting a single thing in return. That boy had acquired the experience and skill to do such a thing. It was not a miracle of luck, nor a miracle of passion. It was not talent, tenacity, or hatred. Without constant, intense training, no one could destroy their own body on a whim like that.
子供には相手が悪かったようね。
So they just said it. He'd been training. He was in the assassin cult. Seeing Bayo cowering in the snow, Toko was disappointed in her own lack of foresight. She had used him for his talent alone, ignoring his inexperience. If Bayo was not a child, his life experience might have given him the strength to bounce back and devour Sojiro after regenerating.
ベオを責めるべきか、それとも君を評価すべきなのか。
Toko quietly lifted her left hand. Nobody noticed. Standing far away, the boy standing there looked like a hunter from a picture book. He had a slender build, but that was likely because he had intentionally shed any excess. Given what she had just witnessed, his cluelessness had to be part of an act, the act of a hunter. As she thought to herself, she suddenly remembered. The first thing that crossed her mind the first time they spoke.
そうだったな。だが、それは忘れていたかったよ、宗十郎君。
No sooner had she felt a slither of sentiment, she returned to her unshakable resolve. She was raised as the heir to the Aozaki household, taught never to question the morality of her actions. That was why even now, she knew exactly what she had to do. She's gonna finish him off.
よかった。
Sojiro muttered, unmoving, perhaps because of the pain in his broken arms. He did not look at Aoko. Instead, his gaze was focused on Alice, who was lying prone on some way away. Aoko thought he looked
よ
lonely.
かったって何がよ。
She asked, spurring him on. They were mere steps from each other, close enough to touch hands. Their quiet voices carried in the stillness.
私たちが無事だったからなんて言ったら怒るわよ。
She was not joking. Sojiro turned away from her slightly, shaking his head.
口にするのは3度目だけど、青崎の心配はしていないんだ。いや、さっきはちょっと意識が飛んだようなんだけど。
He said, as an embarrassed smile crossed his face. The first time he outright fainted. The second time his passion pushed the dizziness and nausea aside. He just calmly did what he could as best he could. Nevertheless, no matter how calm he tried to be, deep within festered a very real rage.
ふん。じゃあ何が良かったのよ、宗十郎。
Ako's voice had a slight tinge of annoyance. Sojiro responded.
だって、ようやく約束が守れた。そっちだけが約束を守ってるのに、こっちは果たせなかっただろう。それがずっと気になっていたんだ。その機会があって、本当に良かった。
His relief expressed itself as a small but heartfelt smile. Ako listened, astonished. For a moment she could not recall what promise Sojiro was talking about. When she remembered what he was talking about, what she told him all that time ago in the amusement park, her mind went blank.
あいつをやっつけるのに協力したら、俺のことは見逃してくれる？
He proposed the deal, but in the end, he hadn't been of any use. It must have been eating away at him this entire time. Ako had considered the agreement binding, but only for herself.
あんなどうでもいいことを。
She muttered in disbelief. Sojiro gave a nod with an affirmative and affirmed with a tiny voice.
約束は自分のために果たすものだって教えてくれたのは青崎だ。だから君が守っている限り俺も守らないといけない。はあ、ずっと俺はそうしたかったんだ。
He is so simple. As if listening to a confessional. Ako stayed silent. That is a beautiful piece of art. She could not find the words to say anyway. Sojiro proved ever the enigma, taking such a trivial promise so seriously and speaking so sincerely about something so basic. She could not wrap her head around how he had beaten a werewolf, but his personality, that was the true mystery. It was no use trying to figure that out now. To Aoko Ozaki, he was a riddle wrapped in an enigma wrapped in a conundrum. Isn't that a SpongeBob reference?
それじゃあ借りは返したから帳尻はゼロだ。これで貸し借りはなしだぞ、青崎。
Sojiro said lightly, perhaps attempting to break the silence. Normally this would have passed her by, but she saw his kindness for what it was.
足がついたのはこっちの方よ。これじゃあどうやって返していいかわからないじゃない。
Okay. I'm placing my idea. I think Sojiro's going to die. Sojiro's going to die. And much like the kitten at the start, Aoko will awaken to her true magic and bring it back to life. That's the relation between the cat at the start and what we will get with Sojiro here. Sojiro nodded in happy agreement.
それより青崎の足なんか塞がってるな。
This is almost the Fate Stay Night pose. Almost.
もしかしてもう立てるのか？
Oh my god, there's so much to read from this image alone. She shot him a stubborn look as if to say, well, duh, obviously. Ever amazed by her grit, he offered her his right hand. Despite being broken at the elbow, to Aoko it looked as sturdy as ever. By all appearances, it was beyond recovery, but would be for the rest of his life. Oh. Oh, it would be. Oh no. Even so, he seemed able to ignore the pain for Aoko's sake.
あんたってバカ。
She uttered under her breath, looking up at him. As much as she hated to admit it, she could not refuse his hand. Resigning herself, she reached out to Sojiro. Oh no. But her hand never reached his. A small bell chimed. What? A line of wind whipped through the air. It cut through his waist like a guillotine